Good evening from N1 Studios, Sarajevo. Tonight we are exploring yet another amazing story. We are exploring long-lost friendships and bringing people together. We all know why this is important. Human condition in all kinds of situations is what really interests us. This is why we're here with doing his story. Before I introduce you to my guest, who is not just an amazing professional in his field, but an amazing person as well, all I want to take us back and remember the story of Justin Fry and his friend he found almost quarter of the century later.
I think I have to preface it, Ika, by saying that I don't have a lot of tangible things from my time in Bosnia in 1994. As we both know, life was a little bit different in the early 90s. We didn't have digital photography technology. So I actually left the Balkans with not a lot of tangible things, not a lot of pictures or mementos of my time here. But I always kept this photograph.
You knew you had it.
Right. It was on my screensaver on my computer.
Okay, but why did it take 25 years for you to take action to find a person from the picture?
So the story of the picture was a story of friendship and a story that started with nonverbal communication. I spoke English. I didn't speak any of the language over here whatsoever. And part of our tasks when we were here was to perform security for a landing zone for United Nations helicopters that were using our camp in Visoko. When we were on this security detail at the landing zone, a lot of children would come over because they like to see the helicopters, they like to see the soldiers. And that was when I started to strike up a friendship with a young boy that you see in the picture that we now know is Amir. It started with no verbal communication, with just a smile and a wave. And then it started to happen every time there was a helicopter come in, he would come to the fence. And he had a wonderful, slightly older sister that would come, and soon the wave turned into hello and some communication. And I really noticed that these kids, they were happy, but they didn't have some of the things that we in Canada or North America sometimes take for granted. Just the little things.
Like candies,
candies, crayons.
Probably it was so intense for you at that time that you remember every detail of our path. And it was an interesting day, interesting few days, definitely. And I just suggest our viewers to see just shortly how it looked like when you first came and when you met Amra, Amir's sister.
It was wonderful.
It was a wonderful experience. Let us see that first, then we'll comment on that. After we aired this story, I was lucky enough to be contacted by a man who lost friendships himself. In his personal letter, he said, "Not all great days start and end happily. It is safe to say that in Drvar on April 24th, 1998 would be one of those days for me and a small group of my colleagues, my brothers in arms." Without further ado, we are going to Trenton, Ontario, Canada, where Canadian veteran Stephen Schriver is joining us by Skype. Steve, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Ika. How are you? Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for joining. Steve, I know this is the very first time you publicly talk about your time in Bosnia, and I can only imagine it is not an easy task to go back and remember certain events that have occurred decades ago. First of all, why are you ready to talk about it now?
That's a good question. I think I've probably been ready for a long time. I just never had the opportunity to do so. But after seeing your story with Justin, I think it probably motivated many of us, including myself, to reach out and see if there's a way we can put some closure to some of our stories we've had over there.
How is it to have those memories and have them for over 2 decades now and just keep them there and nothing happens? Did it ever occur to you to, hey, I really want to know what happened to those people. I want to know what happened in that place.
Yeah, I think the fact that there wasn't any closure to many of our connections with people over there, the fact that there wasn't any closure and we didn't know how things ended up after we had left, that's why it stayed with us for so long. I know for me, that's why the memories stayed strong, because I always wanted to know what happened after I left, how were certain people. We never always had the opportunity of knowing how things ended.
But Steve, have you ever done any research on the places that you've been in Bosnia? Have you ever tried to even think about going back maybe and meeting those people and going to the places where you've been? How was it for you in these past 2 decades?
Well, to be honest, when I first arrived in Bosnia back in '98, the internet was not like it was now. We didn't have social media like we have now. So the thought itself in trying to connect with people that you've met or that you've helped wasn't really a possibility. And so for the years that passed, it's just left lingering. And again, after seeing now that technology has changed, the ability to reach out and search for certain people is much more easier now.
Yeah, and the story with Justin Fry was just, right? Something that really encouraged a lot of people to maybe try to reach out and to try to remember the people and find the people. But okay, Steve, I'm going to take you back to 1998 to Drvar. Before we remember what was your first memory that you had and that you brought from that very place, how did it start for you? What knowledge did you have prior being deployed to Bosnia?
Well, for me, it was my first tour, and to Bosnia, we had almost a year of up training, like every group usually does. So we were well versed in what the situation was to a degree, but everything, as we know, changes all the time. So as much as our training was very good and our leadership was good, for me, I was young, and many of my colleagues at the time were young, and this was our first tour. So there was a lot of shock and feeling out of place just being out of the country for so long. So when I first arrived in Bosnia, the first feelings that I had were, I was homesick fairly quick. It was my first time being on the other side of the world like that, in a situation like that. So it took a while just to adopt to the environment.
But how old were you? How old were you back then in 1998?
Okay, now you're doing the math. So
yeah.
I would say 25, 26.
What did your parents say? What did your family say? Hey, you're going, you are doing this. What did they know about Bosnia at that time? Were they scared for you? How did it look like for you back then?
I think knowing my parents, the less they knew, the better, and the less they thought about it, the better. I mean, they knew I had joined the military, so they knew that this was an obligation of mine, and this was what I signed up to do. So, as surprised as they were, they took it in stride, and I'm sure they worried, like every parent would. And then they just had faith that I would go over there with my friends and colleagues and do a good job and come home. So
it's April 1998, you are flying and you are landing in Bosnia. How was it for you? What was the first memory that you had when you landed? You and your brothers in arms. You always say brothers in arms, and this is not just your story, this is a story of so many people that were around you, people that fought with you. What is that first memory that you bring from Bosnia that you still keep with yourself?
Well, I believe we arrived in mid-January of that year, and my brothers and sisters in arms, we were stationed in Camp Chorlici. So the first probably a couple weeks is just getting to orient yourself to the land. You're trading information with those that are now leaving and going home. So you're getting used to where you're going to live, where you're going to sleep. You're getting all the bits of information you need to carry out your job. It's basically a transformation of information from a group leaving to us coming. So for the first few weeks, it was just overload of information, what to do, what not to do. This is where you are. These are the things we got to do. Even from just the basic necessities of, where we do our laundry or how we do our laundry, where we eat, where we're sleeping, just the little things.
Steve, why is April 24th, 1998 such an important date for you?
Well, we were, like I said, we were stationed in Chorlici, and our group was tasked in April to go and assist with a larger group of soldiers in Camp Drvar, which is just outside the center of the town. And there was some events that took place before we arrived there that required our assistance. It elevated the sense of urgency for the Canadian soldiers to go there and patrol the area. And so I belonged to a mortar platoon, a smaller group of artillerymen and women, and we went to assist in Drvar. So we were in Drvar for a number of weeks leading up to the events that took place April 24th.
Okay, what are those events, to your knowledge? What are the events that you remember? How did it look like? What was happening? How many of you were there? Were you scared for your life? How many civilians were there? What was going on? Can you explain us that very situation in order for us to understand that something like that happened 3 years after the actual war in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Right, and it's important that that you say that it was after the war. So I think a sense of calm and a sense of relief and in some cases complacency had set in. So none of us were really prepared for anything major to happen. But there were some events that, like I said, took place before we arrived there. I believe that there was some crimes committed and some people lost their lives. So it forced us to man that town substantially. The number exactly, I don't know. I'm still fact-checking on that. I would say that there was at least a few hundred between Site 153 downtown, where there was a compound of civilians living, and the camp just outside of that. And we did everything from patrol from the camp to downtown and the entire area, even in some of the hills where we had controlled the civilian movement in and out of that town. In response to some of the crimes committed.
All right, Steve, we've been talking for several months together, and what really stayed with me is that you guys, I'm talking about the Canadian Army, you guys were outnumbered by a large number. I'm wondering what happened there at that date. Like I said, I haven't had that answer from you. Were you scared? Were you aware that something bad could happen to you guys as well, seeing what's going on with the civilians already?
Yes, well,
there were
yes,
18 of you, right? Am I right?
I believe on that date for that situation, yeah, there was. Like I said, it started off with a few hundred, and over the weeks that we were there, because seemingly things were peaceful, and there was a calm, and it looked like all the peace was restored in that area. We felt that it was okay to slowly go back to our bases. So our manpower over the weeks slowly reduced in size until the last few days, when the last remaining soldiers were the group that I was with in the mortar platoon, and we were manning Site 153, which was an abandoned school building in the center of the compound where some returning civilians were living, and they were the ones apparently that were threatened. So Our job was to basically, we were the last group to leave because we were under the understanding that everything was fine and everything was good and our presence wasn't necessary. And it was on the last day, I believe, or second last day we were there when things got out of control. And yes, I do believe there was about 17 or 18 of us. Again, I have to check the exact stats on that, but I believe the group size with us was 17 or 18.
17 or 18. You sent a letter to me, and something that really struck me was this sentence. I would like to read it for you. Maybe we can talk about it. You said, when all hell breaks loose, your brains turn to water and leak out of your ears. All you have to rely is on your instincts and your brother to the left and the right of you. Was it
That's
how you
true.
felt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who coined that phrase, but I've heard it many times over the last 20, 25 years while working. And
Did this help you? Did this help you do what you did over the years, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because you were deployed even to other countries after Bosnia? Did this help you stay alive?
Well, at that time, I didn't know about that phrase. That phrase came later, but whenever I hear that phrase now, I do remember times such as Drvar. And yes, I believe it's true. I believe that's why you rely on your training. Training is valuable. It's perishable. If you don't train, you'll lose it. And fortunate for me, I was surrounded by some of the greatest guys that I've ever met. If it wasn't for their professionalism and if it wasn't for the leadership that was on the ground, I would have been lost. I was new. This day was the first day for many emotions to take place in my life. It was the first time I was truly that scared. And when I say scared, I don't mean scared like a roller coaster ride or skydiving out of a plane. I mean scared possibly for my life. You know, you can't take a time out, and things happen so fast.
It's a different kind of scared. It's the real being scared. I remember you telling me once that your mother said that you never came back the same after Bosnia. You said Bosnia was your first time that you were deployed to a war zone, and your mom said you were never the same. How so?
Well, you'd have to ask her. I mean, I always think that I haven't changed, but now as I've gotten older, I look back and I realize that despite many places I've been and all my colleagues have certainly went on to do great things and many things in their life, but I feel certain I can speak for many of them and say that the key part of Bosnia and that day in Drvar was the fact that it was our first. It really broke us in, so to speak, and it triggered us and prepared us for many events later in life that would come, I feel.
You know, Steve, the best thing about things like this, you know, there's always the positive side of every experience. Even this experience are those friendships that you managed to make. Now, those friendships were lost for over 2 decades. And now we know who those people are. We are seeing at the moment some of the photographs that are made by one of your colleagues and some photographs that are made by you. And it took us some time to find the little girl that we are seeing right now. Who is this little girl and what does she represent to you today?
Well, like I said, many soldiers everywhere, I'm sure, especially in Bosnia, where the connection between local civilians and children was high. Children, for me, are the innocent ones. They're the ones that are helpless. So for me, they've always had a place in my heart. And being in that situation and being in that country at that time, it was hard for me not to gravitate towards, you know, either the elderly or the young that couldn't take care of themselves very good. And it was a struggle for me to see them in a bad place at a bad time. So with this picture that you're talking about, as we know now as Melissa. Yes. For me, I remember being on patrol, not exactly sure where, but during our patrols, we would often travel in 2, 3, 4 vehicles. And because of the mine awareness, as we all know in Bosnia, was great, we weren't allowed to drive down certain roads, and we weren't allowed to leave the vehicle in certain cases. But in this particular case, I remember we took a break. We all pulled over to a safe shoulder on the side of the road, and we waited there for a while. And this is when I saw her and her grandparents, I believe, standing near the end of their driveway. And like most kids, they would, salute us or come up running up and waving and cheering and asking for candy and whatnot. But on this day, I looked and I saw her, and she looked frightened. And that's what really stuck with me. I kept looking at her thinking she's frightened. And of course, I tried to think of what she's looking at. She's looking at all these big armored vehicles and soldiers. We must look like robots. And she couldn't be much more than 5 or 6 years old, so she doesn't understand. So I remember we were going to break there for a while, and we had an interpreter on board our vehicle. And I had asked my sergeant in charge if it was okay if we were allowed to get off the vehicle, and we had assumed that this was a safe area. The families were walking there. There was tire tracks and footprints everywhere, so we had determined that it was a safe place to hop off the vehicle in that area, because I wanted to go and talk to that family.
But you were not allowed to do that as a soldier, or am I right?
It was frowned upon in certain areas. Yeah, it was frowned upon in certain areas to just hop off and talk randomly to people.
But you still did that. You still did that.
I did. I asked. I was intent on making a difference, and I had asked if it was okay. And eventually, I was given permission to hop off just in that area where they were standing if I wanted to talk for a few minutes. And I utilized the interpreter that we had at the time to talk to both the little girl and her grandparents for me. And I can't remember everything that was discussed. It's a long time ago. But I do remember all I really wanted to get across was that we were there to help, and we were there to make things better. And I just remember asking the interpreter to tell her that everything was going to be okay.
We talked about it a lot, Steve, and we said, okay, we spoke to Melissa, and you have the opportunity to speak to her even today, and we spoke about it. We said something like, maybe now she doesn't remember as a grown-up all those little details, because people forget things that happened a long time ago, especially if you were a kid. But at that time, probably in her child brain, she thought, hey, I finally feel safe. So this is what you did. This is what you did with her. We have more people that we looked for. We included our network of our journalists here in Bosnia and even further. And we found Bojana Žižić. Tell me something more about Bojana. Tell me about that picture in the newspapers, Canadian newspapers, you shaking hands with her brother and her father, and tell me about your relationship today.
Well, that picture was significant because that was taken in the compound at Site 153 in Drvar. So her and her family were one of the families living in that compound that we had put up patrols and boundaries around to protect them. And we were there for weeks already at that time. And I remember as a soldier, one of my duties was to do patrols throughout the city and also do ground patrols around that compound. And often enough, when we would walk to and from our building to one of the gates, we would interact with some of the civilians there. Not very much, but sometimes just a wave or a hello or a smile goes a long way. And I remember her brother actually was playing soccer with a couple other individuals. And while I was walking out to the gate to relieve one of the soldiers there to take my post, the soccer ball rolled over towards me. And he was a little bit hesitant on what to do, so I smiled and I kicked it back, and then he kicked it back, I kicked it back, and so it started there, and it became this thing where every day I would go to the gate. They recognized
just this simple human interaction, right? Simple human interaction again.
They could play soccer with, yeah.
Can go along. And you speak to Bojana almost on a daily basis. You speak to her husband Marko. Are you planning to visit? Are you planning on visiting sometime soon Drvar? What are the plans? And do you guys talk about what happened back then?
Yeah, we've had, the first couple conversations we've had were just overwhelming. I mean, again, for me, I'm still, even though I know the technology exists, I never thought that that this would ever happen. And thanks to you and some of your colleagues for reaching out and making this possible. If it wasn't for you and your connections, I would have never been able to find some of these people again. And that's one of the amazing things is when we talk about closure, when it comes to Bojana, she was one of the people that I left Bosnia wondering how she was. I didn't know if she even survived the events that day or anything afterwards. I knew nothing. So it was an empty page in my book. Everybody has a book, and in my book, there's some empty pages.
Now you can fill up those pages slowly. Yeah, Bojana is an amazing person, and I'm also looking forward to seeing her and to extending this story even more. And bringing more people together. Of course, it was our pleasure, and it was pleasure of my colleagues, Maria Milic. I have to tell her that, of course. But I do have to ask you one more thing, Steve. After going through all this that you've been through, you've been through many places, as we said, but does one bring or suffer or start seeing certain PTSD signals? Do you have that? Do you have sleepless nights over it, over the events? Of course, you said Bosnia was your first one. How do you cope with those difficult moments that you've been through?
Well, I mean, for me, I still feel healthy and strong, and I don't think that the memories, even though some were bad, I don't think they've affected me too much. I'm not the one to diagnose myself, but I know that for some of my other colleagues that were there during those events, some of them, and I'm in touch with many of them on a daily basis. We've remained friends for all these years. And
I'm asking you, Steve, this because you have lost some of your colleagues, some of your very close colleagues in peace. Yes.
I mean, unfortunately, we have had lost some friends in the past 20 plus years that suffer from mental illness or PTSD. And I can never guess what goes through their mind or what they suffer from or what triggers that. That's why this story is important to me, because it's much bigger than me and my connection with a few people. Everybody I was there with during that tour, and everybody that's been involved in any of the tours in Bosnia have all had their connections with special people. And but this particular event in Drvar is much bigger than me, because it involves, like I said, 17, 18 of my great colleagues, and it involves a lot of families that live there in that compound that day.
Steve, what about, what more do we have to explore about that very date for your brothers in arms and your colleagues? What is important to say so they find some peace and you can find some peace?
Well, once we got talking about this story, and after I was fortunate enough to reunite with some of the people I connected with, I realized that the events that day, I know, affected some of my colleagues, and many of the other colleagues that were there. I don't know how it affects them, but I think everybody deserves some sort of closure. I feel confident, speaking for all of us, that nobody really knows how things turned out or why things happened to begin with. And although some things I still don't know to this day why, my job with this story, I feel, is to hopefully take a piece of this back to them and show them that first, everything that we did, we didn't do it for nothing. And everything we did was successful. And as one of my good friends, Drew, had said, we proved that day that the system works. The system doesn't always work, but that day the system worked. And it was a very successful day, despite all the horrible things that happened. And I think everyone needs to know, like I do now with Bojana and Marco and their wonderful family, everyone needs to know now that after we left, what we did helped make a new beginning and a better tomorrow.
What is next for you? When are you coming to Bosnia?
The plans are the writing's on the wall. I plan on visiting next April on the anniversary, and hopefully I will be able to reunite with Melissa and her family, Bojana and Marco and their family and their children. They've become like a distant pen pal slash family of mine.
Right?
Yes, I talk to Marco all the time, and this guy's great. I just can't wait to see that guy. He's honestly, he's like a brother of mine already after many, many conversations.
Amazing. What is Bosnia to you today? You're Canadian. What is Bosnia to you?
Well, Bosnia was, like I said, it triggered a lot of emotions, a lot of firsts for me. One thing that you said earlier about my mom saying that I never came back the same. I did leave a piece of myself, I believe, in Bosnia. And when I return, my goal is to walk the same grounds in Drvar where those events took place. I'm going to walk the same grounds, and I'm going to see Drvar today and see how it has made a complete full circle and how Bosnia in general has flourished since the war. And I'm going to make a decision that I either get that piece of myself back, or I may fall in love with Bosnia to a certain degree and decide to leave that piece there in harmony.
That was exactly what I wanted to ask you. Are you leaving that piece here, or you're taking it with you? And it depends, like you said yourself, when you are here, you will know. You will definitely know once you just step on the Bosnian soil.
That's right. We'll see.
That's right. Steve, I would like to thank you for now. We'll leave it here. I'm looking forward to following up this story, seeing you in Bosnia, seeing you reconnect with the people that you used to talk to, that you used to spend time with back in the 1998, and just seeing how you feel once you are here in Bosnia. I'm just really anxious. I can't wait myself.
Me too. It'll be good to see.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm Ferrer Gotić. Thank you for watching.